Anne Applebaum is now dialed in from Washington. Good evening, Ms. Applebaum.
Good evening.
Also, in your most recent book, Autocracy, Inc., you describe the mechanisms how autocracies go to power, how they support each other. And is Autocracy, Inc. in the process of getting a new member by way of the United States?
So to be clear, the United States is still a democracy. We still have freedom of speech. We still have rights. We still have a legal opposition. But it is true that we now have a president and a coterie of people around him who are, much like autocrats and liberal leaders in other countries, are now trying to change the rules of the political system. They are trying to alter the nature of the civil service, to politicize it. They're trying to use regulatory agencies to affect institutions. They may be trying to use federal funding to influence what can be taught or said at universities. So it is a very important break from any American presidency that we've seen before.
What's interesting, usually autocracies like big state apparatus. But what we see in the United States is the destruction of the state apparatus. What do you think stands behind that?
I don't want to guess at the motives of the people who are doing this, but it is clear that some of them may have or could conceivably have financial motives. So Elon Musk, who is going through the federal government and is making personal decisions about what to fund and what not to fund, he's taken over the Treasury payment system and is making decisions from there. So it's not Congress, it's not even Donald Trump, it's him deciding. He's somebody who has big conflicts of interest. You know, he has companies that have very big federal contracts, Starlink, Tesla, SpaceX, and others. And to have someone in that position making those kinds of decisions is also pretty unprecedented. And it does look like the part of the point of what they're doing is to have very big tax cuts that would benefit wealthy people. I mean, it might benefit others as well, but at the cost of big social programs. And the kind of money they're talking about cutting will mean they would need to cut health care for either for the elderly or for the poor. So it looks like what they're doing is trying to rebalance or restructure the federal government so that wealthier people benefit to the expense of others.
And what's interesting is that those part of public authorities, part of those are also antitrust, anti-corruption organizations. And that is not a matter of coincidence, or is it?
Well, some of the institutions that they've attacked are, for example, inspectors generals. These are people inside different government institutions who look for corruption and who look for conflicts of ethics. They've also attacked some government agencies that are responsible for oversight. And that, yes, you're right. I mean, that's very disturbing. I mean, these are the institutions that were set up by Congress in order to measure and monitor what the federal government does. And what Musk is doing is saying, I'm in charge of deciding that. Me with all of my, and him with all of his conflicts of interest is in charge of that. I mean, to be clear, he's the public face of this, and it's him who appears to have designed the system, namely to take over the computer systems of the federal government, which I think, by the way, is unprecedented. But obviously, Donald Trump is behind it. I mean, it's his presidency. He's the one who's allowed Musk to do this. And Musk is coming into conflict with other members of the cabinet and with other parts of the government, and so we don't know how this will end. But the attempt to go around congressionally mandated systems to undermine, as you say, organizations and institutions that were created to fight back against corruption is really profoundly disturbing.
And do you see a parallel to Russia? Because if you look at Russia, the oligarchs and Putin, because of the 1990s, became very rich. And now we have tech billionaires in the United States that also want to have political power. So how is it that Trump is so much sympathizing with Putin?
So we've never had in America oligarchs of the kind that they have in Russia. In other words, people who have profound amounts of both political power and economic power, and who wield them simultaneously. And of course, we've had wealthy people influencing the government before. That's not unusual, and it's not unusual in any country, not even in Germany. But to actually have the billionaires making decisions on who gets funded and how money is spent, this is indeed something new. Whether it's related to Donald Trump's admiration for Russia, whether it's related to his political or really more to his financial links, is hard to tell. It is true that Donald Trump admires political leaders who are both wealthy and powerful, and he understands that combination as something preferable to the traditional American model, which is that our presidents, while they were very often well-off men, they weren't billionaires. And so it may be that he admires that kind of power, that combination of financial and political power. That might be one of the things at the root of his admiration for Russia and for his apparent desire to give Russia far more say in European politics than ever before.
We in Europe look at the United States and we think there's not so much resistance from the political opposition. Will they oppose in the future or not?
So if you look at other countries where something like this has happened, where there's been an autocratic takeover or an attempted one, it very often is the case that initially the opposition becomes divided. Really in America, the rules of politics have all changed, and some people still want to play by the old rules. Some people are trying to find the new solutions. And so we're at a moment when it seems very, very shattered. Also because some of what was done was unexpected. As I said, the use of computer systems to take over the government rather than Congress. People weren't prepared to respond. But I think you will begin to see response. You now see a reaction. You see protests against Tesla distributors. There are protests across the country. This is because people have identified Musk as the source of the problem. You've been seeing protests at meetings, these so-called town halls, where Republican congressmen meet with their constituents. You're beginning to see more organized protests at state capitals. People have to understand what's happening, and then they'll figure out what's the best way to resist it. And I think it will take some time. It's also true, and this I know from studying authoritarian regimes, initially when there is this kind of assault on norms and on institutions and rules, very often the first reaction that people have is to be angry at the losers or at the opposition. Why aren't you doing something? Why aren't you doing more? As I said, it will take time for them to find a new strategy and a new way to speak. I think the unexpected nature of this really can't be underestimated. I mean, people did warn about what might happen before the election, but it was pretty clear that Americans just didn't believe it. They didn't think it was possible. And now finding the right language and finding the right way to protest is difficult. We don't have influence in the Democrats don't have influence in Congress. They don't have, control of courts. We just have to see, we have to hope that the court system will kick in and will work. We have to hope that, people who work inside the federal government and also in private business begin to push back against changes that they know are illegal.
Anne Applebaum, thank you very much for this talk. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.